Hello, everyone. Settler's Lament here, and the answer to the stream is yes. Goodbye, everyone. Uh, but no, seriously, the more important answer to is John Fisher 2.0 here is no, he's not. So everyone, please shame him. Make sure to comment in the comment section here. Shame on you, John Fisher. Uh, but for now, I guess our main speaker is going to be Computing the Soul, which for those of you who are unaware, the artist formerly known as Renaissance Man has shut down his old
Yep.
channel.
Yeah.
And his new channel is Computing the Soul. So I have it linked in the description. Make sure to subscribe to it if you're not already. And also, speaking of new channels, I also started my own new channel, though this one is sticking around. I'm going to do a new channel called Martyr's Lament, which is that's pinned in the live chat, and it's also in the description. And Martyr's Lament is going to be mostly me doing readings of Christian stuff, mostly patristics. I mean, there'll probably be modern Christian stuff too. And also, I'm going to have it opened up to submissions. So,
Settler.
yeah.
I'm just getting a message from a friend of mine, and she's saying that there's some echo.
I don't think that's on my end.
I don't know. Is the rest of the show? Oh, I can hear myself in your microphone a little bit, so it might be that.
Okay. Could you just mute yourself when you're not talking then?
No, it's no. She's saying it's just her. Actually, don't worry about it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Ooh, goodness.
But yes. So where's that? Okay, my new channel, Martyr's Lament, linked in the description, linked in the pinned comment in the live stream, and it's going to be mostly readings of Christian stuff, mostly patristics, probably, though other Christian stuff too, and it'll be open to submissions. So if you want to if you want to do a recording yourself and have me upload it on my channel, I'll be willing to do that. Just make sure that it's on theme, and if you're unsure about the theme, just send me a message on Twitter or Discord or something. And if and also you need to have a decent quality mic. You don't need like an amazing mic or anything, but something around the quality of what I have currently, which I only spent like $30 on this mic, so it's not like anything crazy. But I don't want you using like a phone mic. So that's just basically the rules for that new channel if you want to upload anything there. And it doesn't have to be specifically Catholic. I mean, I wouldn't be uploading something like the Trail of Blood, but I'm okay with uploading like not non-Catholic stuff as long as it's not like specifically anti-Catholic. So that's basically all that. And the topic of today's stream is pretty self-explanatory. It's, does God exist? And as we've already determined, yes, he does. It's proven. It's a fact. And you're wrong if you disagree. But we'll be going into a bit more detail on that.
Well, I mean, it's a little bit more than a fact. It's like truth itself, more strictly put. So, like, to call it a fact is a little bit reductive. He's the fact maker, the truth
it's
maker.
It's not just a fact, it's the fact.
That's
It's
just
fact.
your opinion, man.
Yeah. So, where did you want to start, Settler?
Okay, so like, I mean, come on, like, God obviously doesn't exist. This is just a cope people come up with because they didn't know how to explain lightning back in the day, right?
Well, of course not. Yeah, I think everybody watching this stream, like actual atheists here, I would hope would know better, but apparently, I mean, you see, I
know it probably is going to seem like the atheist I'm straw manning with starting with such a stupid argument, but come on, we know atheists still make that argument. I'll try and do better with.
I mean, you see, there are some people who still unironically believe it's kind of like a magic sky daddy, because even if they think that. Like, even if they take a view like it's like one of the Egyptian gods or something, it still is essentially saying that the god that Christians, Muslims to some extent anyway, and Jews believe in, or at least the majorities in these groups believe in, is essentially a magic sky daddy. Because, well, no, nobody actually believes that God is like a man in the sky kind of thing. It's something far more nuanced and detailed and frankly sensible than that.
I think, okay, that might be a straw man of some of them, although not all of them. But I think just the underlying sentiment is that theists are not as rigorous and like intellectually lower. That's the underlying instinct that they have.
Well, maybe, but that's because that's the underlying instinct of the culture at large. And generally speaking, I don't just mean this amongst atheists as well. There's a tendency for people not really to think outside of the box. So you see, maybe I can't blame them is the wrong word, but I can certainly understand where they get it from. Yeah, especially considering the quality of religious education has seriously declined. People had a greater sense of their faith 100 years ago for the most part than they do now, despite the internet, right? So, actually,
Shuffles around rosaries.
True. No, it's not a rosary, it's my keys. But yeah, I mean, you see, I'm not really sure where to start because we can just refute, because there's so many ways you can take this question.
Well, why not keep it simple? Go with so we were planning to start with just the intellectual route, and then afterwards just crushing them and pointing out how evil they are. So maybe if you just start with like the 5 ways, those are a few different angles.
I mean,
honestly, yeah.
I mean, what I meant more was like, obviously we discussed this before the stream started, but should we go after the contemporary issues that atheists are bringing up, or just go over it generally, Settler?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I think a good place to start would just be a sort of basic explanation of the classical arguments for the existence of God. Like, why is it that Thomas Aquinas argued that God has to exist?
Okay, I think I figured out where I would start anyway. So there is this misconception amongst largely Christians who have some idea of Aquinas, but don't have a full idea of Aquinas, that when we speak of uncaused cause, we think of God as if he's like the first domino in a set, of dominoes falling over and knocking each other over. This is actually wrong. This is an analogy for something that you would call per accidens causal chains. So you have, something hits something moves forward, like what maybe the contraptions out of Tom and Jerry or out of Wile E. Coyote or something like that. No, it's not like that. This set of chains Aquinas actually holds can be infinite. What Aquinas believes in is something far more profound. He believes that things are caused in themselves by God. So rather than it being in this, and I bring this issue up because this is what held me back from Catholicism for about a year. When Aquinas speaks of the uncaused cause, which I will explain in a moment, for those who don't know this particular thing, I think most people will know this. When he speaks of the uncaused cause, he isn't talking about a first domino. He is speaking as something which gives being, it doesn't just cause it and that's all there is. It's the cause in itself of all things. And so when Aquinas, in his first way, the one that most people are familiar with, says that the first cause can't be prior to itself, he's not speaking of the domino being prior to itself, although this would be true as well. He's speaking of the fact that there can't be the being itself prior to itself to bring it itself into being. And therefore, there must be a first cause. This is one of the misconceptions that people make. And so this is why I want to nail it down, even for theists here. God isn't the first domino. He actually holds together the entire chain by virtue of giving him being, by giving the things being. What was the second one? I can't remember the second way. There's 5 ways, for those who don't know. There's the third way, which is to do with necessary things. So we observe that, for example, Settler, like, your channel's great, but it's not necessary to the existence of the universe, right?
That doesn't sound true. I mean, maybe it is.
I mean, it started at some point, didn't it? So it's not necessary to the universe's existence, is it?
I mean, they claim it started at some point, but can you really prove that?
I don't know.
It started in the mind of God from all eternity past.
But not as a distinct thing. God may have pre-known it, but it wasn't always manifest. But more importantly, we have to notice that there are some things in the universe that are necessary for it to function. So, for example, we need a concept of being. This would be one example amongst many. Now, there are some things that are necessary. I can't specifically think of any right now, which, while they're necessary, don't exist in themselves. Yeah, I have an idea. Maybe beauty of things, right? So the beauty of a planet and the beauty of a woman, these things are in a sense necessary because they're universally applicable to these things, right? But it isn't in itself considered alone necessary. Although this one is a really bad example because it would fold into being. But ultimately, we're reduced to a point where we need something necessary, and precisely that something is being, right? And so, because being, can't come from nothing, there must be being eternally. And for something to be in being, for anything to be in being, there must be, in some sense, the properties contained in its being, right? And this is where we get all of the omni-properties of God. So, for example, this is why we are said in the book of Genesis to be created in the likeness and image of God. We possess rationality. We possess will. Now, God doesn't hold these as independent things like a human being does, but he nonetheless contains everything that is necessary for those things beings. So we know that on some level, God has personality, right? We know that God has intellect. Now, one of my favorite arguments, and if you don't mind, Settler, I'm going to slightly detour a little bit because this is one of the current problems that's going on the internet with what is left of the new atheists. These are the arguments that they tend to bring up. Do you mind?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So some of you may have heard of two atheists. There's a guy called Dr. Graham Oppy, who, many of you may know from debates with Dr. Edward Fazer. And there's also a great channel called Intellectual Conservatism by a guy called Swan Sonner, who does a lot of stuff on this. And he goes on there and he talks about a particular problem. And so does Joe Schmid, who's this other atheist guy who I don't know exactly where he is. I think he's in the philosophical department. He's got published papers. And they make an argument for something called existential inertia, which kind of flies in the face of everything I've just posited. Because the natural conclusion, or the assumed premise, I'm taking my jumper off because it's a bit warm in here. The assumed premise in this is that objects, in a sense, have their own existence independent of anything else, right? So, for example, look at your table, or if you're on the sofa, look at the sofa, and look at the things on there. Like, I've got a Nokia phone in my hand, and I'm looking at 2 pint glasses, right? These things, according to Dr. Oppy and Schmid, they, in some sense, retain their own existence, and when these things are destroyed, they, of course, lose it. And this seems, fairly straightforward, but there's a really serious problem with this, an incredibly serious problem that I've actually addressed to Schmid, and the response I got from him on his blog wasn't particularly good, I think, and we'll talk about that here as well. So, if we consider the existence of things relative to each other, right? Because bear in mind, objects in this case, they don't have any existence. There's no existence derived from outside of themselves. So when we judge existence of two things, right, we're judging them relative to each other. So, for example, my glass here that I have in my hand, you can't see it, and the crucifix that's on my desk. These things are existent relative to each other. The problem is that this doesn't work because as long as there's like a finite state, a finite number of states describing existence. So, for example, non-existence, existence in the mind, and existence in concrete reality. As long as we have a finite number of these states, and yet the existence of a particular thing is relative, that means that something can simultaneously not exist and exist at the same time. Now, what's the problem with this? The problem with this is that this violates the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot simultaneously exist and not exist. It can't simultaneously exist in the same sense of, in the mind and manifest out in front of you, right? You don't, when I look at the icon I'm looking at right now, the icon itself that is in front of me is not in my head. They are distinct. And the fact that I can even, start thinking about something else, doesn't that, in a sense, destroy the object that is in my intellect as well? But relative to what? You see the problem here. We've got a bundle of contradictions here from Oppie and from Joe Schmid. And Joe Schmid, to his credit, responded on his blog to me. I don't actually have it open, but I can recall what he said. And he said, well, most modern Platonists, my conclusion from this would be that there has to be a being grounding all of these things, that always is, that can determine the existence of the particular things and in what order they exist, right? This is similar to the fourth way of Aquinas. So, for instance, you need being to ground the existence of the two cups in a way that's extrinsic to them. Otherwise, you have the contradiction there. And they don't actually possess their own existence. They are instead granted it by this being. Now, what Schmid says to me in response is he says, well, the majority of modern Platonist philosophers, which is where this argument comes from, it comes from a dialogue of Plato called Phaedo, but it's further elaborated upon by Plotinus and, of course, St. Thomas. I have a real suspicion that Marsilio Ficino as well talks about this. He's a 15th century Platonist, a Neoplatonist philosopher. And he says, well, the majority of modern Platonists will consider this abstract, this being to be abstract, which, of course, I suspect in Schmid's mind means that it doesn't exist. But the trouble is that how can you say that the being that grounds the universe doesn't exist? If anything, because it's absolute being, it exists more than everything else. So this thing that we're judging by, this thing that grounds the cup, this thing that grounds the icon, this thing that grounds the person who is speaking into this microphone, this thing actually exists more than anything that judges relative to it. Now, another thing that he said is that even if this were the case, we wouldn't be able to determine whether or not this pure being was personal or not. And in fact, when he was watching my stream, he said that he believed in a kind of a being that doesn't have personhood, that doesn't possess personality.
Well, isn't he just a deist then?
Well, maybe. I'm
That
not
sounds
clear.
like
I
deism.
think he's a kind of he's a person who will probably see this and will probably respond in the comment section and clarify if Joe Schmid finds out. So the problem with his argument is that we have things in being right now that have personality. We have, man, for example, men have personalities. Men have intellects and wills, right? They're rational things. So therefore, it makes no sense, unless we believe that personality is a privation, as if, we can somehow destroy a part of a thing and bring about personhood, which sounds absurd, I think. I don't think I have to go any further. It doesn't make any sense that the being that grants being to man wouldn't have a personhood in some sense, because otherwise, how could man have it? And that's the major problem that I know of that's going on right now in the philosophical circles with the atheist and the religious philosophers talking right now. So that's my response there. And the final one, this is the fifth way, relates to the intentionality of objects. So, for example, I have an Amazon Kindle in my hand, and it falls under gravity, right? But is it because the Kindle itself decides that it wants to fall? Is there an intellect in the Kindle that makes it fall? And the answer is obviously not. So there has to be some intellect that directs these things. Now, if we look into
that just sounds like a knuckle dragging assertion. Why does there have to be an intellect? Isn't gravity enough?
Well, the reason is because it behaves in an intelligent way and it's not falling under its own force, right? There needs to be something to sustain the laws there. Even Spinoza was a pantheist. There needs to be a reason why it falls under its own force, because it's not making the decision. Something else has to be, fundamentally. So from this, we recognize, in fact, Aquinas would say that the thing that caused the force, in line with Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagites, a work on the angelic hierarchies, are the powers, are the rank of the angels called the powers, which control the forces of gravity, right? And that's not quite as silly as people might think if they actually go and dig into it. But the point is that then what brings about that, and then you have the same problem, and there needs to be being there to do it. So, like, I know I've had a very long soliloquy, but that's basically the 5 ways as I remember them, with the exception of the second, which I really can't. Oh wait, that's sufficient cause, but that's not really that important.
On this argument, I saw someone posting, maybe seriously or maybe not seriously, but why we need God and for things to exist? That was their question.
Sorry, what was the question? Can you repeat it?
Why do we need God for things to exist?
Well, why do we need being for things to exist? That's essentially what he's asking. Why do we need existence for things to exist?
Yes. I know.
Why does something need to give the existence to it? Like, I have a plate in front of me. It seems to be existing quite fine. Why does it need something external to it to give it that existence?
Well, I mean, I'd just go through the same contradiction that I went earlier on. You see, you have the problem where if things self-exist, then this existence is judged relatively, and therefore you end up in a situation where things could potentially not exist relative to each other. So there has to be something grounding it.
Right. So, of course, yeah. So we see how that doesn't really make sense. But if we take, like, that's basically the kind of question they ask, I just don't understand anymore. Like, I used to be like a 14-year-old new atheist, whatever, that watch Hitchens videos, but I just don't understand anymore.
Everyone type 21st reaction was cringe in the chat.
Yeah, but
I was as well. I used to watch I used to sit and watch The Drunken Peasants, which is the Amazing Atheists podcast.
Oh, I remember that podcast. That is peak cringe. L's and F's in the chat, please.
Yes,
but
L's and F.
But what I don't understand now is that, okay, what do they actually mean by I don't believe in God? Because if they're asking a question like that, that means they do presume God, but they just don't call it that, or they're just kind of confused, or, of course, the other real answer is that they select a God in their own image. So if you can elucidate that for me, that would be extravagant.
Well, you see, it really varies, right? For example, I had a debate with an atheist fellow. I've forgotten his name. His name completely eludes me. But the logical conclusion of his view was essentially that when we discover things, we bring them into being. Like, I don't think he actually held this in reality. But this was the logical conclusion of what his view was, right? We don't actually discover things; they come into being when we look at them, and truth is decided by consensus as opposed to correspondence. So consensus would be like a majority of people believe it's true, therefore it's true. Correspondence would be when our mind corresponds to the reality exterior to it. So, for example, by his standard, Christianity would have been true up until maybe the late I don't even know. Like, in Europe, probably the late 1970s, 1980s, and even then, right? So, but then all of a sudden it doesn't become true because, the atheists come along and, change people's minds, right? But this, of course, is absurd because this implies that reality doesn't exist and we just decide what reality is. This is some of them. A lot of them, I presume, are just not clear on what the theistic philosophers are teaching. Because I think that classical theism, when you think about it, this is the specific school that I've been articulating. I think that classical theism is incredibly obvious. I think that the refutations for them are stupid. One of which I've just given because it leads to the contradiction. Another one, which is modal collapse, we can talk about it later on. They're stupid. They don't actually make sense, and they're often reliant on, essentially misreading the arguments, first of all, and second of all, making mistakes in modal logic. And the third reason, which I think is the overwhelming majority of reasons, are moral factors. God tells me that I can't engage in a certain act. It can be any act, right? Some people might like to take the Lord's name in vain. Some people might have, they might have problems with lust. They might have problems with pride, right? They might have problems with violence or whatever. And the existence of a God that gives objective meaning to everything would mean that they'd have to admit that the things that they were doing were objectively wrong and stop. That would be my view, at least. There's probably people who are exceptions to the rule, but I think this gets about 90-95% of them.
You stunned me with your brilliance. But
Please stop.
That's an old line from Mark Levin. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think in some more candid conversations I've had with atheists that the line or that what you're saying does seem to be quite true. That for a lot of them, there's just many things that they do very often of a sexual nature, though not always that they would have to stop doing if they became religious, and that they really don't want to stop doing. That's a really big inconvenience on your life.
Actually, according to Saint Aquinas and Saint Alphonsus Ligorian, I'm getting this from Father Ripperger. One of the daughters of lust specifically is the hatred of God, because God tells you not to engage in illicit sexual acts, and because lust and the sexual passion is so powerful, it overrides the rational part of the mind that tells you maybe you shouldn't be doing this, and makes people regress, and it makes them despise the person who creates the laws that tell them not to do this. Or better yet, they just deny being itself.
Yep. So I don't know. So where else can we go with this? I don't really have anything else more to add to that, unless you do 21.
Well, perhaps we could try and figure out some of their intellectual positions. So the majority don't go this way, but the only way for you to basically deny being and to go the intellectual route, other than I don't like what he says, even though that's like an umbrella thing that all of them deal with.
I think he's gone.
He muted himself, so he probably had to stop talking.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I messed up. I don't know why I muted, but the only way they could do that where I don't presume existence or reality don't real, brain into that, is if they just go down the Cartesian hole. And I mean, we know it's a dead end, but for some reason, like the 1% of people that are insane decide to do that. So it's kind of an enigma why they would do that.
Well, I mean, the mere fact that they can't sincerely say that they know everything means that they couldn't be the cause of their own being, because being itself knows all that's in being, because it's granting being to that, right? And yet even a solipsist will say that they're surprised sometimes, which implies that they don't know something. So solipsism becomes false. You see? Unless we say I've never actually been surprised, but that's bordering on the absurd. I mean, it is the absurd.
Well, I mean, again, this just seems like just like a vain assertion. Why would being mean that you have to know everything and you can't be surprised?
Because everything includes every and thing, and things, by virtue of their existence, have existence, which means they have being.
Good. Here's a really difficult. I don't know. Sorry, I was multitasking. I should never multitask.
Yeah.
Here's a really difficult question. Try this one.
Okay.
It's there. It's on the screen.
Is God changing or not? If he, the source of morality, is changing, then how wouldn't it be possible in the future for it to be moral not to donate to Settlers Lament? Well, God's not changing, right? But Settler is providing you with a service, right? So, I mean, obviously, while it's not obliged that you donate to Settlers Lament, it might help him out.
Whoa! It's not obliged. That's quite the spurious assertion now.
See, you could help sustain his being.
Bruh.
But yeah. So okay. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, let's go to my favorite part about how they're just evil, and how when we have doubts, we're evil also, and they suck.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has fallen short of the glory of God, so, you know, I'm evil as well.
Yeah, we know that. Sorry.
Yeah, I know it too. Yeah.
Yeah. But
You see the problem. Oh wait, are you gonna go? Because you're just dropping out a little bit there.
No, you go.
Okay, so you see, the problem is that for the vast majority of atheists, they're not going to know what I'm on about, because they're not, like, as much as they may say so, they're not really logical thinkers like most people aren't logical thinkers, right? 90% of people are converted by other things than logical argument. I wasn't purely argued into Christianity, but it was a very, very large part of it. Right, but apparently I'm more of an exception rather than the rule. So really, I've said all of this stuff here more to give people who are already Christian an idea of what God actually is, so that they are able, when it comes to logical discussion, to defend it better. Right. So, for example, you know, God not being the first domino, because then you avoid the existential inertia problem. Right. But when you're dealing with actual atheists, you have to deal with them in a way that is moral. Because as we recall from the Book of Wisdom, you know, people are attracted by their nature to virtue. And so there is even a level of virtue that will crack through the biggest coon brain. Right? Coon brain destroys people in a way that they aren't actually aware. And I'm actually working on a video at the moment on Christian sexual teaching, largely with an emphasis on Catholic teaching on it. But one of the greatest things that breaks through Coombe, that breaks through arrogance, even in some cases, is, you know, acting in a saintly way. And this is what I think that people should be focused on. We can say that atheists are stupid, and they may hold to stupid positions. We can say that they're immoral and they're evil, as if we haven't been ourselves. I mean, maybe not. That was a little bit harsh, but like, that was phrased wrong. But like, as if, you know, we're evil as well. In a sense, but we could just as easily be in their position if God had deprived us of certain graces at certain points. You know, I could be dead and in hell right now if God hadn't granted me being through all of the horrible things that I've done. I can tell you I've done many. And so I think with a mind realizing that we've been granted a gift in recognizing this fairly obvious fact about reality, I think that the way that you bring atheists back to the faith isn't with logical argument, because you can't just whack someone over the head with the things I've just told you. Even if they're intelligent enough to realize it, their emotions, the vices that they're locked into, and other considerations will make them disregard it. You know, men have preferred the darkness to the light because the light is the darkness is comfortable. You know, and I don't have to give reasons for that. I think we all intuitively know that on some level. You know, effeminacy, that is, you know, dwelling on pleasure as opposed to pursuing the arduous good, that is something that it's a very easy existence. And you need to give people a motivation to draw themselves out of that. And frankly, a syllogism isn't enough for most people. But virtue is. This is why God in his wisdom raised up the fathers, the saints. This is why he rose up Moses, a man who goes before Pharaoh, a poor man drawn out of the desert by the call of God to command him to let the people of Israel go. This is why he raises up Jeremiah, a man who knows he won't be listened to, and still goes before the kings of Judah, Zedekiah and Jeconiah, and still rebukes them, even when they burn his prophecies and throw him down a well. This is why God, incarnate in the Virgin Mary, comes to us and suffers after rebuking the chief priests and the Pharisees, and rebuking to some extent the common practices of the day, pointing out the inconsistencies, pointing out the logic. But it isn't the logic of Jesus that converts people, although it's very obviously there. And I mean, obviously being the Logos, it's the virtue. You ask the average person, the average little old lady, or whatever in your parish, you ask the average, guy or girl even, and you ask them why are you a Christian? It's because you see something good or you see something beautiful in it. And that's the main reason, beyond it being true, as we've just shown, or at least the existence of God, right? And so I think that people need to realize that more. So
I know. I don't think you can be saved if you're not reading Edward Fraser and Thomas Aquinas.
Woo.
That's a joke, Protestants.
I mean, they should be reading Fraser anyway, and they should be reading the Bible.
Yeah, for all their no, I won't say that joke. But yeah, so I mean, it doesn't seem obvious enough to people, because people still argue on the internet all the time, and use intellectual means through, and so it's repeatedly over and over again we prove that we don't understand. But I don't want to do it the other way, but it feels like you have to, where literally, as in the great words of Jesse Lee Pearson, not all, but most, and I would say basically all people have, most of the time, very limited rational faculty, including us and everything. So appealing to it is just like appealing to the tiny little dwarf on top of the elephant in someone's literal being. So just it's almost 1% of the time I would ever spend making intellectual arguments anymore, because it just doesn't work. But yeah, it seems to be true. If we accept that sin corrupts the mind itself and makes people and overwhelms them and distorts their mind to the point that they have an even lesser rational faculty, of course it's going to be this ridiculous maelstrom of chaos out there, where it's just the things they say are nonsensical, and they can barely control themselves. So yeah, it makes a lot more sense that way. And I mean, to everyone out there, I would just say, stop arguing with the people. It's pointless.
Oh, I agree. You should be behaving in the most virtuous way possible, because, as I've said, man has an intuitive sense of virtue, and pursuing that as much as possible. And there are many books that you can read. I've read this book. I've nearly finished it. It's called Humility of Heart, and I've talked about this on my channel at least twice. I mean, there's only 2 videos up there at the moment, but by Father Cajetan Mary de Bergamo. Now, this book has changed my life. It's really made it clear the arrogance that I have suffered from. And, the only people who are in heaven are the humble, and the only people who are in hell are the proud. We are saved by mercy, not by virtue of meeting I mean, there is, of course, a standard, but we don't save ourselves apart from God's mercy. God saves us, right? And this primarily happens through humility, which also happens to be the most beautiful virtue, not just in itself, but also because it brings about all other virtues. And so if people here genuinely want to convert people, and, this is something that I'm not very good at, but I now know that, humility is the way to go, because all the saints had humility, and the saints were known for their heroic virtue.
What's the line? You stun us again with your brilliance. Quoting Mark Levin.
Sorry, multitasking once again. So sorry. Also, John Fisher is still not here. Remember to comment below. Comment in the live chat too. It's, I don't know, something about John Fisher not being here. Complain. Go unsubscribe from his YouTube channel. You know, I've been telling all you guys subscribe to him. Unsubscribe. I'm joking. But yeah. So again, like I know what a lot of atheists would say to this is like all this is just based on like wild presuppositions. There's no like evidence for any of this. I don't know what they're gonna say. Like it's just like, oh, you're just asserting all this. Like, oh, like it has to get being. Oh, being means you have to know everything. Like, no, like shut up. You're just making this up. This is just like stupid medieval philosophy. Is what they would say.
So they'd propose science in response, wouldn't they? I bet they'd very much like
I
that.
believe in science.
Oh, funny thing about science. Have you heard of Pearson null hypothesis testing? Anybody here?
I don't know. Sounds vaguely familiar.
Okay, so it's one of the two methods that we were taught in my master's degree program for generating things called p-values, which show roughly to what extent where a certain hypothesis proposed is true, right? So, or at least it correlates with the data. That's more accurate. So, for example, say I want to test the height of women versus the height of men, and I suppose, you know, women generally speaking are shorter than men. This is a really bad example, right? And then I have one hypothesis like this, and I have another one that says the opposite. Now, I take this and I throw it through this equation, which is called Pearson null hypothesis testing, to generate this value and come to conclusions based on the data, right? And this is what generates all of the conclusions that you see in all of the major scientific journals. At least Pearson is used for social sciences generally, some medicine, some natural sciences, and in my case, yes, it's used in computer science to some extent. The problem is that this null hypothesis testing method, which is used to, I might add, give papers their teeth, it's founded on two separate statistical methods that contain a contradiction. Now, you can watch Luke Smith. Luke Smith did a podcast on this if you want to know specifically what. I'll call it the statistical problem of induction and not elaborate on it any further because it's a very complicated, this is a very complicated and nuanced thing that I don't have the information on me right now to really articulate. But you know the problem? It's founded on the contradiction. There's a contradiction right there. And you know what that means? That means that the vast majority of scientific papers published in social sciences, in a lot of them in medicine, a lot of them in the natural sciences, and all over the academy, are by definition false. And we have been using this method since, at the very least, I mean, the two papers that produced the methods that caused the contradiction were written in the 50s. But we've been doing this for decades and decades and decades. So when you put your trust in science over silly philosophy, you are choosing to trust in a statistical method, at least for a large part of it, that is of itself false over philosophy and formal logic, which is by definition true as long as you avoid certain errors in logic and you keep the presuppositions or axioms which are approaching with them true. And the only axiom that I've actually assumed here is that something can't come from nothing, which I think is fairly obvious to everyone.
Okay.
Is it?
I need to slow you down right there. You say like science is like cringe and fake and everything, but like think about it this way: science has given us iPhones, longer life expectancies, and abortion. well, what does Christianity ever give us? It gave us like huts and peasants. So like, come on.
Well, first of all, science didn't give you it didn't in a strict sense give you your mobile phone. Engineering did. Second of all, just because it makes things work better and it like gratifies certain pleasures doesn't mean it's a good thing. You know,
what?
Yeah, I know, right? But like one of the biggest problems, one of the things that leads to at the very least, like sexual problems the most, is being gluttonous. Because it turns out that our appetite for food and our appetite for carnal pleasure is linked. Right? These things are linked in an intrinsic way. So as we produce more food, in fact, this is noted in, I believe it's the book of Ezekiel, and I'm remembering this from St. Alphonsus Liguori. St. Alphonsus Liguori notes from Ezekiel that the thing that led to the abominations that went on in the Sodom, and this isn't purely sodomy, strictly speaking, this is also all manner of pride, right? This all began in having an over excess of bread. It came from, a certain level of material wealth. And because they mismanaged that disordered all of their other appetites, and this led to them becoming reprobate. And we even have, Inspiring Philosophy did a video on this. You should be aware, though, he's Protestant. He looked into...
Unfortunately.
Yeah, he is. It's annoying. Be aware of that, and he has... Yeah, just be careful with him, right? But his historical videos are very good. And he says they found the site of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? They found it. They found not volcanic glass, but melted glass that was formed at very high temperature. They found the ruins of the city, of a settlement that was seemingly destroyed by an airburst comet around about 4,000 years ago. So, like, causality aside, right, we have a history telling us that there was a very reprobate city that was reprobate on account of its wealth, and was destroyed, right, in the way that the scriptures describe. So, be aware. Be aware. Like, if you want to remove the causal link between becoming reprobate in the sense of like doing horrible things and material success, I mean, frankly, that's wrong. Like, you can quibble about whether God did it, and I mean, obviously he did, because he's being, right. You see, we can't even quibble about that, right? We can argue over like whatever the reason, the overarching and complete reason is, right? But we know that God chose to do it. We know the reason why these people became so evil, and so maybe this richness, this maybe this material wealth that we're talking about, like iPhones, food, internet websites. Maybe this isn't. Also, another thing I should mention, if I remember correctly, staring at a screen for too long will do a similar thing because it gives us pleasure to look at it. Maybe this material wealth, maybe it isn't such a good thing.
So are you saying staring at screens was the sin of Sodom?
Well, it can be linked to the same appetite.
So you're saying... Yeah, I just want to reiterate on the how it's not about like irrational faculty and their evil and everything. As you're going through these points, just remember, all the viewers out there, that it can be a bit more subtle than just I don't want to do this thing, so that's why I don't believe it. They can also basically translate that through like the rational arguments they make, like where they end up, and usually their points obviously are going to be like bad and incoherent, but they even conceal their own wants and their own like rebellion through supposed like intellectual confusion and I'm worried about this, or this doesn't make sense. So it's kind of tricky, and I don't know, basically what I would do is just ignore their intellectual problems and everything, because as we said, it's the dwarf on top of the elephant. You need to like whip the elephant. Excuse me. You need to encourage a change of heart. Let me phrase it that way.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So, those who don't know, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who was the founder of the Jesuit order, he was a soldier, and he was a criminal as well. There's actually still a listing in Spain of his criminal record, and I have a feeling I know why it was, but I don't want to say it because I'm not certain. But it took him getting his leg like hit with a cannonball, storming a fortress, and him being stuck in a hospital with nothing but the lives. I can't remember if it was the scriptures or the lives of the saints, but around good books. It took him doing that to abandon his previous lifestyle, which he himself admitted was full of pride, right, and full of sin. And so, like, it's the same thing with maybe some of these atheists. Maybe they need a little bit of a slap around the chops, maybe a little bit of material privation. Maybe they need the internet taken away. Maybe they need their phones taken away. Maybe they need access to large amounts of food and other things. Maybe they need this and to be stuck in a room with something good to really change their mind. Maybe they don't need all of these internet debates which are apt to excite anger on both sides. Maybe they don't need logical arguments because they don't always work, or rather they're not reliable. Maybe they just need like maybe a slap around the chops for some of them. Some of them might need to be disconnected from the internet. Some of them might need to be disconnected from, maybe they need a little bit of suffering to wake them up. What is it that they often say? There's no atheists in foxholes, right? I mean, that's obviously not strictly true, but maybe there needs to be some suffering to wake these people up. Someone says in the comment section, atheist concentration camp.
Don't say.
Oh, sorry.
Till the lesson of the day, trauma works. So next thing,
but yeah, no, I mean, I agree with the general concept. I mean, this is one of the greatest problems of our one of the greatest causes of our modern problems is the huge amounts of overconsumption. We're all, this isn't anything unique, but we're all just dopamine addicts. Where everything around us is there to stimulate us. Our food, our computers, all of our entertainment, all this stuff is to constantly stimulate the brain and make you feel pleasure and pleasure and pleasure. And this stuff just needs to be cut out. Also, to add to your list, another thing atheists need is a dad.
Oof. I mean, there's books on that, but you see, the thing with that is that you see that's putting it down to something that they can't help.
Well, no, I mean, you can't help whether or not you had a dad, but you can still break the you can still sort of fix the problems that caused.
It's certainly harder to conceive of objective moral rules when you don't have a father to lay down that law. And if consequently your mother is always at work and is unable to enforce it, because we know that the schools aren't doing that currently. We know that the schools are running with this obsessively not disciplining people thing, right? So I mean, it's no wonder that you're getting all of these people out of school who aren't very well formed in these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Wait, you're saying we already lost the battle when by the age they're 5? Because honestly, that was half sarcastic, but it's just true. And it's honestly, it's kind of annoying knowing that basically doing things the correct way so as to not leave an empty gaping hole in the heart of a child. That's a luxury now. It's one income household, a luxury. Ooh, homeschooling, a luxury that is difficult to attain in a period of time when you can access 2,000 calories for at any point, basically 24/7 for $5, and it's just BS.
Yeah. It's again, this isn't anything unique, but it has been remarked that's quite ironic that the wealthiest people in all of human history are the ones that are complaining they can't afford to have a mother home to take care of the kids.
Well, the problem is that they'd be dragged away, and CPS would take the kids away if they made the required sacrifices to do that.
Well, you see, the thing is that even outside of post-war America, for maybe 25 years, that was the only case where you had the woman at home all the time. Women took a helper role a lot of the time.
But
And they certainly did work.
That is true that historically women had to work. But historically, for the most time, that the family was working at home, like as farmers or something like that.
Yes. I think there should be a return to that, but I just don't want to. I don't think that you guys believe that, right? But I don't want anybody who's watching to come to the conclusion that we want the 1950s again. Of course not. That was the eve of the revolution.
Sorry.
I want the 950s again.
Do not challenge my upper middle class E-trad sensibilities renaissance.
I mean, there are
They will not
112
work with
people
their
watching.
hands.
There are 112 people watching, and there might be some people who think this is an ideal case. And frankly, I'd like to remind them that the contraceptive pill, if I remember correctly, was actually invented in 1958. I think I might be wrong. With the Roth decision, which enabled obscenity in the United States, was passed in the 1950s. I think that we had similar decisions in the UK around the same time. You see, like the 1950s weren't like a great time to be alive.
Yeah, it was already far left.
Yeah, I mean, you can go throughout history and you'll see that there's always a struggle between a force of preserving a sensible approach to reality and perhaps a side that isn't so much, or they have different perspectives. You will always find that. Even in the 13th century, you had heretics who were doing things like denying God's incarnation, right? And it took a crusade to stop that. And people were like, "Oh, well, that was just bigoted Catholicism." It's like, well, you seem to forget that they actually killed. I believe it's considered a martyrdom. They killed the papal legate, right? And they were crazy for other reasons, right?
They like destroying churches and icons and stuff.
Oh yeah, my priest. I can't remember if he did his PhD on it or his master's degree on it, but he said that what these heretics would do. What were they called? The Cathars, the Cathari, the Albigensians, as they were called at the time, because Cathari means something different. It means pure ones, and it's been used in other contexts. They would walk around with icons with the eyes of Mary and Jesus crossed out. And there's a report in St. Alphonsus Liguori's History of Heretics and Heresies and their Refutation, where the one of the cities in the Languedoc where they were was besieged. And one of the heretics threw a book of the Gospels and spouted some very horrible, blasphemy against it at the army that had him besieged. So you see, there's always been these sorts of problems.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the Cathars were King James only fundamentalist Baptists.
Oh no,
that's what they claim in the Trail of Blood.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on from that, super chats, I guess, quickly, and I only have one from Chris W, and he doesn't have a message, but I wanted to thank you for your $20 super chat, Chris W. So yeah, thanks for that. So what else? What else do we have to discuss?
Yeah,
there's some interesting stuff going on in the chat, I've noticed.
Oh, please ignore the chat.
I love the chat.
If the chat ever has anything good other than maybe the occasional funny joke.
The Pareto principle, the bell curve at work in my life.
Someone did have it's a pretty common question, but still someone did have a question. I'm not seeing it. I think it was from Isabel or something like that. And she, assuming it's actually a she, asked something like why. I mean, I generally assume it's not actually a she, but who knows. But let's be polite. Isabel asked something. I don't see it anymore in the chat, but she asked something like, why is it that God creates people knowing that that they'll end up going to hell, or knowing that he'll have to end up punishing them?
Well, that's a very good question. You see, he doesn't like. One thing that would be important to first of all preface this with is that God never damns people to hell, right? They always have, in potential, the grace to be saved. It's just whether or not that grace is actualized by God as to whether or not they're actually saved. This is, of course, being substantive grace, right? Think of it this way.
Even Judas himself he decided to hang himself afterwards. He was still alive after he betrayed him. He told the high priest, "I betrayed this man for 30 silver," throws the silver at them. He still chooses at the end, when there is a possibility that he could have gone and seen Jesus and Jesus will have forgiven him, and that will have been an amazing part of the gospel.
Yeah, it was either St. John Chrysostom or St. Augustine, I think it was Chrysostom, who said, there's such a thing. In fact, it's definitely Chrysostom now I think about it. There's such a thing as repenting in a good way and repenting in an evil way. Good people who repent will go to confession, they'll say their sins, and they'll do the penance, right? For example, the woman who washed Jesus' feet with her tears and her hair, the sinful woman, that would be an example of good repentance. But there are also those who repent badly, who, like Judas, hang themselves from a tree. So where was I going? Where was the question? Okay, so why does God create people knowing that they're going to be sent to hell? Well, it's relatively simple.
The question on screen is more specifically how she
okay. Okay, so yeah, I know I'm asking bottom tier questions, but why would God destroy bad people and reprobates if he knew it was going to happen anyway? Well, because the just need the people who will do the reprobate things. Because as St. Paul says in the epistle to the Romans, suffering leads to endurance, and endurance leads to character, and character leads to hope, which is, I don't know if he's using this in the theological context of hope. I'm not sure. But the point is that you don't develop virtue without suffering. You aren't martyred without somebody doing the martyrdom, even if that's like more than one person. There needed to be somebody there who would drive their hand through Christ's wrists to nail him to the cross. And likewise with all of the various martyrs and saints throughout history, you need, in some sense, suffering so that certain things can happen. Therefore, God has seen it expedient to do so.
Dennis Prager in the chat says, reactionary Christianity will never get anywhere. I hate to break it to you guys, but it will not bless.
Well, I mean, my goal here isn't to save the West. My goal here is to save souls. And this isn't reactionary Christianity. This is just Catholicism.
Yeah.
I mean, let's think about it this way, right? What is the West really without Christianity? Because over the last 250 years, it's been abandoned, and yet it is so much of the cultural fabric. So I don't think we could even really speak of the West without Christianity, and I think that it's in an inferior form without it. So surely, if we wish to save the West in any sense, we need to bring that back. So we can say what we want about reactionary Christianity, as if reactionary Christianity is like some sort of distinct thing. You're not going to save anything without tending to Christian principles anyway. So even if it fails in the sense of preserving the West in a manifest way, like a manifest concrete way, whatever that means, right? Even if it succeeded and it didn't involve Christianity, then it still would be an incomplete West. And if we saved the Christianity without the West and helped people out, we'd still be doing more than saving the non-Christian parts of the West.
No. But the whole point of his comment is that it's, well, at least for me, is that it's a example of
them like hiding their motives behind like the intellect. So he's making a comment about, oh, it's not going to save the West. Well, therefore you should be a Christ-denying like Satanist. No, it's not. My point is that I don't think the comment was even about.
Oh yeah, I know the implication there. That's why I'm refuting the logic that's presented.
But right, but he doesn't. He's just using it as a formalism, as an excuse to be a Christ denier. Like, that's not.
Well, yes. So you take the excuse from the man, so he has to be more forward with it.
Right. I just wish people would be a bit more honest and stuff.
But I can't know his motivation for starting.
It's obvious that the guy is appears, at least. I want to like Calvinize anyone. I want to say it's obvious. It appears that the guy is the type of person who like just sees religion for its social benefits. And I know, I mean, I've gotten these sort of comments from a lot of people on this channel, and I don't know how many times I need to refute this. People saying stuff, saying that they assume that like I became Catholic because I think it's the most based form of Christianity, or because I think it will save Western civilization or something. Like, no, I became Catholic because it's true, and you should become Catholic because it's true.
It's
And
like,
I do think that it's the most based form of Christianity, but assuming by based we mean true. But that's it's getting like the direction that went in the wrong way.
Yeah, you see, someone in the chat nails it, right? Like Dennis Prager says, yes, religion is a tool. This is an attitude that is very prevalent on the dissident
You're a
right,
tool.
and it's evil. It's an evil. Like, I'm not saying that Prager is evil for suggesting this. If he actually thinks this is essentially paganism, right? This is saying, oh, we're just going to build these idols because the idols help us, right? We're only going to follow these rules because they help us in some sense. You know, what you do, you don't build a religion. You don't construct a set of moral rules simply because it helps the society. That's the realm of politics. That's the realm of natural law ethics and of philosophy. The point of religion is self-serving. The point of religion is to get somebody to the divine. And you don't just invent that. This is the problem that the Greco-Roman pagans had, right? They viewed their gods as a means to an end. They'd offer, say, the temple of Apollo to get some wisdom. They would offer, the temple of Ceres for a good harvest, or Ceres, I don't know how it's pronounced, maybe cherries. And you know what? It was miserable, and people were miserable, and you can tell it from the archaeological difference between the pagan graves and what they said, and the mourning of people who died pagan over the things that were written on the graves of the Christians. To treat Christianity as some sort of tool, be it to maximize trait agreeableness or ethnocentrism, or to treat it as if it's some sort of like stupid means to a social end, is to entirely miss the point, and to also miss the desired effect that you want. Because if you're not pursuing the religion sincerely for itself and receiving the grace, then you're not going to get the full benefit, because it's not set up that way.
Yeah, and obviously he's shedding the formalism now, and it's example of him saying, "Oh, why don't the plebs understand this? It's a means of control." Well, first of all, yes, it is a justification for control, and the plebs and everyone above them, whoever, should be controlled and restrained intensely. But that's his problem. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, as the Psalms say, the rod of reproof brings wisdom.
Well, yeah, I mean, we need discipline.
I think.
We need discipline, everyone. I mean, I haven't actually started this, but I've been reading against Rousseau after the video that you made, Settler, and I found it very interesting so far the way he dunks on Rousseau, de Maistre. But I've read the title, man is evil in his essence, and while I wouldn't phrase it that way, man has original sin, and this is all men. This isn't just plebs or the lower classes or the society at large. This is
It isn't even just Protestants. Sorry, all that for that joke.
Yeah. You need it from the very highest person in the society, be it the king or whatever, down to the lowest peasant. We all have original sin, and so if by plebs you mean literally everybody, then yes. But I don't think that's how it sounds. But I don't know your motive.
Well, it seems his motive is clear. It's sorry that I left, Settler. But I mean, that's what he's saying. He's like, I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to be treated like a pleb, even though he's totally a pleb and he must be controlled. That's all it is. It's not, oh, it's not going to save the West, or oh, it's just an instrument that doesn't have truth or everything. This is the fundamental point. Not all, but basically all atheism is Satanism. How do you say it? Like non serviam or something? Just means I will not
serve. Yeah.
I will not serve. And this is the underlying, as Pareto would put it, I think it's the underlying residue that all their formalisms and intellectual arguments, whatever, they put on top of it. I will not serve. I will worship myself in my own judgment, and I will, craft things in my own image and my own preferences. When essentially, and why so many people, not all, but basically all, reject the truth is because they do not want to die unto self. And that's the whole problem here. And yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the thing I don't want to do is I don't want to assert motives on the part of people on the parts of people in the in the live chat, because that's rash judgment, right? And also I don't want to be as pessimistic as what you've said implies reaction. I don't think that the vast majority of people are lost. I think that there's potential in a lot more people than we will ever be aware of. We can't know the insides of these people's heads. We can see their behavior. We can see that their behavior is bad, but we don't know the whole story, right? Only God knows that, and even the person themselves doesn't know the full story entirely, right? And so I would be hesitant to have such to express myself in such words.
This is a good cop, bad cop dynamic we got here. But I mean, of course, it's true that I didn't say, I wasn't presuming that they were totally lost. I'm just saying that's the fundamental problem here. They're just saying I will not serve, and like all their jargon and all their intellectual navel gazing is just there to conceal that. And like all these comments that he was making, it wasn't about the essential truth of the message. It was about, oh, it's probably a tool, or oh, it's not going to have this good effect, blah, 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 blah. When at the fundamentals of it, they're saying, I will not serve. So we'll have to find a way to help people die. But for now, I'm stumped.
Or you can't move someone else's will. You just have to give them really good reason to. And that's why I said earlier on, you need to get people, or the people who are aware, they need to be more virtuous. They need to apply themselves to the spiritual life. And you can get, if you go to secondhand shops, they're really cheap. You can get, I got the Imitation of Christ for under £5 at a secondhand bookshop. You can root through them, and the books are incredibly cheap because there's a lot of old people who will die, and they will leave behind all of these spiritual books, and none of the young people are interested in them, right? So you've got a huge wealth of information that you can put at your fingertips, methods on how to pray, methods on how to practice the various virtues. You have Bibles. You should be reading them every day. You've got the rosary. You should be praying that every day. If you really want to make a difference in an atheist's life, then you have to give them a motivation to renounce their atheism beyond just logic, because that won't work with them. And I think this is ultimately the way that we turn non-serviam to serviam, right? By giving people the motivation. I think this is one of the reasons why, I don't know Jesus' mind, of course, but I think this is one of the great things about the kingdom of heaven. It's a motivating factor.
When you speak the Latin, do you drop the Anglo? That sound like
I know some Latin, so yeah, I do drop the Anglo.
It's like kind of like singers, whoever, or British actors or British singers, when they start doing acting like in Hollywood or do singing meant for the larger English world, that suddenly they're able to like stop sounding Anglo. It's kind of.
Wait, really? Does my Latin accent change that much?
I'm exaggerating a little bit. It just reminded me of that, but
yeah. There's different pronunciation rules for ecclesiastical Latin than English, of course. So yeah, I pronounce it differently.
Oh, so it's gonna BRB. Yeah. So the chat is satanic. What's next? No, I'm just kidding. But I still do think not all, but basically all atheism is just Satanism, and I'll die on that hill.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna quickly go grab some water. I'll be like 2 minutes. Okay.
Based. I'm gonna look at the chat for a second. Maybe read some of them. Um, so XUEN, I don't know how to say it, says everyone has a concept of God and believes God is on their side. Each person's personal personal relationship with God is their own experience. Yeah, this is a very individualistic Protestant belief, I would say, and that's not how it works. So some people are in a state of grace and some people are not. So some people cut off their relationship with God through mortal sin, and so they don't have a personal relationship with Him, so they can't report to you about their connection with Him. So this is the problem we have, is that sometimes it's not always personal, and sometimes we have to accept, this is an example of pride. I'm not saying the commenter is prideful, but in Protestantism I notice a strain of pride in that you're trusting that your own judgment and your own subconscious has not been deformed and mutated in a way where what you feel or sense or supposedly hear from God is correct and everything. And that's a problem there, because many people do not have the Holy Spirit speaking through them and have a deformed subconscious that they misinterpret as God's will. That's a problem that I had with people when I was young. It's like, why do all these people think they have this connection, but then they have these contradictory interpretations, they have these contradictory ideas and everything? This doesn't make sense. This sounds unrigorous. And it's because of that individualism and kind of Protestant tradition.
Okay, so I heard a lot about Protestantism.
It was someone saying I was just responding to a comment. Let me find it. Where it's like everyone has a concept of God and believes God is on their side. Each person has a personal relationship with God in their own experience. And
Well, I mean,
the point that some people are not in a state of grace and cut off that relationship. So,
I mean, it really depends what we mean by God is on everyone's side. Because in a sense, He is. He wants everyone to be saved, right? He actively wills that everyone is saved, although He permits certain people to go to hell, right? I mean, if you mean what this probably means is people will use God to justify whatever they want, and yeah, there are, but the trouble is that they're wrong. So,
yeah.
like, anyone can appeal to anything and be wrong.
He also said everyone has a concept of God, and that's not going to work either. Or like, each personal relationship with God is their own experience, and it's kind of denying that kind of like universal coherence, that there is basically one correct kind of relationship and there's one correct concept of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to do with this. The classic atheist objection of some people disagree. Okay, some people disagree. So, okay, well.
Well, I mean, some people. Some people think that they're like they're like a different sex, right? Like, but they're not. So, okay, some people believe that. People believe stupid things all the time. Like, we all have stupid beliefs, and so do societies. So what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
But that's the formalism, right? It's like, what if you're wrong, or other people disagree, or there's a bunch of choices. So that's the formalism. But what's the underlying residue? And I think they're afraid of sticking out a position that's unpopular, without being absolutely certain that it's true and everything. Like, they're more concerned about appeal to popularity or some kind of easy way out that isn't there.
I mean, the ultimate end of this is that you have to concede that there isn't one reality, but there's as many realities as there are people, which is kind of weird. Because then you end up with a problem. You end up with a problem wherein, like, nobody can say that they're. How do you even begin to take apart how much of a problem this idea is? You have, if people are all in their own separate realities, how can they interact? And I mean that not only in an objective ontological sense, right? So if people are in their own separate realities, they shouldn't be able to interact because they have different principles of being, right? But I mean this in a very pronounced social sense as well. If people have their own little groups or themselves and they picket fence themselves off, how can you have a society? right? Not only is it a problem on a logical level, because if there was more than one principle of being, that would, then one of them wouldn't be the principle of being because they're identical, right? And there's nothing to distinguish them. But the problem of this logic is made manifest even further on a societal level, because you have, the people, there's like on 8chan, there were people who used to worship circles and their intersections, which is really strange, right? How do you make a coherent society based on that when you've got people who worship circles, you've got people who worship anything they want? They have no fixed good that they all agree on, and so it fails, right? Same with any reality that isn't the true one.
Endless schism, endless chaos, I thought that was about chaos versus orders, like order good, chaos evil. Well, if there's constant schism and disagreement, maybe we don't have some goodness here. Maybe we have a problem.
Christianity was definitely not first, and there are many sects that worship differently. God says you go to him through God, so no man is able to do it. Well, yeah, not on his own. Yeah, God grants him the grace to pray. But just because Christianity wasn't first doesn't mean it's not true. And just because some other religion was first doesn't mean it's like, or whatever the oldest extant religion is, doesn't mean that is necessarily true. Although, of course, Adam and Eve possessed true religion in a sense.
Christianity was first because the Trinity existed from the beginning of time, but I know that's kind of like a
I mean, to be fair to the atheists, they are of course talking about what's first that can be easily historically.
Yes, that's what I mean. Like, I'm responding to the idea maybe that people who view that Hinduism was first. Like, we can look at Hinduism, see how chaotic it is, and see like some of the flagrant manifest weirdnesses of many of the orthodox schools of Hinduism, and come to the conclusion that it's wrong. Like, I came to the conclusion it was wrong simply because it's so chaotic, right? There's no defined orthodoxy in Hinduism. There are 6 orthodox schools that have their various different beliefs, and even they vary, right? You've got all the different shrines to all the different gods. And it strikes me as Greco-Roman paganism, or very similar to it.
So I don't know how to say this guy's name, but there's a, it doesn't have to be, like when I was getting raised up, or, childhood years, the Protestants that's around, they have a kind of mentality of everything else was wrong, and then we have this little nestle of light right here, and like the rest of the world from the past and from everywhere around us is wrong, and we're right and everything. But when I was returning to Catholicism, there's a more what is it called? Like you have the sugar helps the medicine go down, whatever. Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
There's a more coherent, plausible narrative to this, in that it's not that everybody else is like just 100% wrong about everything, and it's just like incoherent, and this is the only 100% correct thing. It's that there was a gradient of it, and yes, there were previous religions that existed, but you could interpret that as they were primitive, and they were grasping at some truths, and then eventually we had the full fulfillment of truth that came around 0 AD. So it doesn't have to be, but there's so many choices, and what if you're wrong? Well, it's not that they're 100% wrong. It's just that there's one complete fulfillment that happened at a certain point in time.
Well, yeah, not only that, but also there are falsehoods that are mingled into other religions as well. So, for example, Islam denying that Christ died on the cross. That would be an example, even though Islam is basically natural law.
Do all of them deny that the crucifixion? Like all parts of Islam?
It's in Surah 2 it says that Christ was taken up to God in himself, and the majority of there are different theories on the crucifixion in Islam. One of them is the swoon theory, where he didn't die on the cross and instead woke up in the tomb, which is told by some of them. There's the substitution theory, where someone appearing to be Christ died in his place, and Christ was just taken up to God. But there are a bunch of them. But there's
actually just a debate on reason and theology. That's a Catholic theological YouTube channel, by the way.
That's why I thought of it. Yeah, that's why I thought of it. Yeah. but the message of Surah 2 of the Quran is that, Christ didn't die on the cross and wasn't resurrected as a unit. That's what we can take away from all of this. Right? That's wrong. That's obviously historically wrong. But, with Christianity, you have the fullness of truth, insofar as man can reckon it. Not the fullness of truth that we see in heaven, but the fullness of truth we can see on earth. And before that, you had other religions that manifested degrees of truth as well.
Right. Look, the fundamental problem.
You're roboting 21.
Sorry, it was my mic. I was saying that as if we haven't mulled through several fundamental problems here.
He's gone again.
Man, this mic. Sorry. It's that they trust their own judgment too much. They presume that.
And it's a lot like with the progressives.
The NRX point is that, oh, hey, progressives say, oh, we don't have religion and freedom from religion. And then they end up inserting their materialist ideology into everything. And that is, in fact, their religion. So it's the same thing with atheists. It's like, I don't believe in God.
I'm not religious.
Yes, you are. And deep down, they probably know that's true. I mean, some might be lying to themselves. Some might be just confused about this. I think more people are confused, honestly. But you must understand, in order to get back on the right path, that you do have a religion and you have a God, and it might be self-worship or something like that. But you have to die unto yourself. That's the only way.
Hey, we're joined by John Fisher. A little late.
My apologies. I overslept. Also, daylight savings is at B.
I almost overslept too.
So we don't have too much time left, but we've already gone over the sort of basic arguments for the existence of God. Is there anything you'd like to add? Any unique takes you feel like you have, Fisher?
Oh, right. So usually I find that people like to sell it as like one argument, but in truth, I think that there are a lot of things that culminate and build up into giving someone like an assent to the idea that God exists. Like, I don't think anyone's ever been told like one specific argument and bam, they've resorted to theism or even Christianity.
I converted to deism in the course of one argument.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
I found a unicorn.
Yeah, I am like quite unique from what I've heard.
Okay, fair enough. So it's very rare that it happens, but there you go. My only point is, usually you have to be receptive in terms of listening to people out why it is that they don't believe in God and address it bit by bit rather than providing like this one big argument. Try to actually provide a cumulative case of arguments, to help them believe that theism is more likely than not. And it's usually then when people actually start building up religious exercise in their life that the existence of God just becomes a lot more obvious. I know usually Pascal's wager is considered kind of a meme, but in truth, usually when the likeliness of Christianity builds up, people end up taking that wager a little seriously. And then they think, okay, is it really working because because X, Y, and Z, naturalistic reasons, this is why religion's just been beneficial? Or is this really, really true? In which case, people are just going to side with, oh, yeah, it is. I have so much to gain from it and so little to lose. And it just becomes so ingrained that you find when you're really practicing the religion, you don't want to miss out. And even if it means losing out on a lot of earthly things, you just end up giving your religious life much more importance as time goes on. I think it is a really powerful argument, but I think it just has to be given a lot more support than, just like a patent declaration. In summation, Pascal's wager is good. Just keep up ramping the possibility that God does exist. Don't be afraid to just provide much more probabilistic reasons, just anything that gets that likeliness up. And I think people are just going to be very receptive to it.
Yeah.
It's a good
Sounds
flag
good.
in the background. It's a good beanie.
Oh, thank you.
So okay, so I don't know. What else do people want to say?
I don't like this. I don't like this schism between religion and the existence of God that's going on in the chat. I find that annoying.
What do you mean, like people saying that they admit God exists, but they don't believe in a particular religion?
Well, I mean, it seems evidently quite silly to me that you've conceded the existence of a personal God who controls everything and has certain desires for you, and then you don't accept a set of rules based on that, and you assume that God hasn't like got that same God that creates everything might not create like a gigantic structure where he can convey people towards the good using more than just your mind. It seems very strange beyond the fact like there's this strange antipathy towards rules that's gone on over the last, I mean, it's been going for hundreds of years in some way or another, but this has happened especially recently where people are just, oh, like organized religion missed me with that because like organization bad for some reason. It doesn't make sense with the picture of a personal, intelligent, organized God, who knows that the people of Earth aren't all, intelligent enough, and none of them, in fact, are intelligent enough to really figure it out. So why wouldn't he make like a giant organization? It seems kind of obvious to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that's what it is. I will say, for the sake of our master here on the stream, Settler, that another example of the satanic impulse, "I will not serve," is when you do not give your obligatory money to him. You're saying, "I will not serve." You need to serve.
Bruh.
Yes, yeah, donation is mandatory, of course. So I don't know, is that it? Are we done? Does anyone have anything else to say?
Actually, one final thing to put onto the end of what I just said, right? They might say something, oh, like religion has caused so many evils in the world. It's like, well, I mean, like, let's say Catholic Church pedophilia, or they'll point out the Crusades or something. It's like, as if people in groups and people, even on their own, don't do evil things without religion. Like, this is a non-argument. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the stock atheist arguments are just really stupid. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, if anyone doesn't have anything else, then I guess we can chill. Yeah, I'll take that as a nothing else. So yeah, so computing the soul. Go ahead. What's your channel?
Okay, so I was a Renaissance man, but I started a new channel because I really got tired of arguing a lot on the other channel, because it was like an occasion to arguing. So I decided I'd make a channel with more content that's longer form. So one of the things, well, I'm working on two things at the moment. I'm doing a series giving a commentary on Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules from his new book, with a more like a less Peterson-esque, maybe sort of like certainly a bit of a Peterson-esque view, but a lot more sourced in Christian philosophers and in the ancient philosophers, thinking about this in my own way without Jordan Peterson's commentary on the rules. And I'm also working on a video. This is probably going to be very long, on a sort of a compendium of basic Christian but mostly Catholic sexual teaching. Something that I can give to secular people, particularly those who are interested in comparative religion, to articulate from reason, from scripture, and from the Catholic tradition, and also the earlier Christian tradition, if you want to make that completely irrelevant schism, why why the Christian view of sex is the sensible one, and to just give people information on it, right? Because a lot of people just assume, you're a prude, and so you don't really understand experience or whatever. So it's like, if I can present that to people convincingly, then that can be useful. But that's what I'm doing at the moment. And the link, I will post it again in the chat under my Computing the Soul thing. If you don't find it there, it will be in the description. Thank you very much for sticking that there, Settler.
Yeah, no worries. I don't think you have mod power, so you probably can't post links. But if you just post a comment or something in the live chat, I'll give you mod powers. But yeah.
Thank
so 21 or Shill your channel.
Yeah, it's a good channel. I put some commentary on there. I put some lectures on there. I think it's very educational. And I think it was St. Paul who said, just my last comment, St. Paul said, people try and live and then they eventually die. But we have to die so that we may live. So just take that and dwell on that.
Okay. And John Fisher.
Well, I'm not sure I deserve to shell out my channel given the fact that I've given only 5 minutes of content, but my YouTube channel is Original Wind Productions. I post a lot of videos, especially about Catholicism there. If anyone wants to follow an ongoing series on Vatican II's document Lumen Gentium, I'm planning on having part 3 out by the end of this week. And I'm also going to be uploading more live streams featuring more hot button issues. So feel free to follow along there. And if you like what you see, of course, I have a Patreon. Feel free to donate or not. But please subscribe.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to chime in. John, I watched your stream on the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, and I found that very interesting. So,
thank you.
Yeah, it was really good stuff, I thought. It really made me think, because I kind of had like a more of a Septuagint. I was more pro Septuagint Masoretic before I watched that, and even now I'm still not sure. It gave me a lot to think about.
Right. Usually the one that gets a lot of people more siding with the Septuagint is it has a much greater Christian pedigree, but even the Masoretic text does have its insights.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's, of course, I'm not discounting it for critical texts, but I mean, I'm very I have a sort of an intuitive suspicion for the Masoretic text for a number of reasons, but that's besides the point for the stream.
Right. Stick around after, and maybe we can talk about it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. And so yeah, and there's me, Settlers Lament. If you're not subscribed to this channel, then subscribe. It's mandatory. And if you are, then good. Make sure to unsubscribe from John Fisher for being late. Make sure to subscribe to Martyr's Lament, my new channel that I'll be doing readings of Christian stuff on, probably mostly patristics, but other stuff too. And as I said at the beginning, it will also be open to submissions. So if you would like to do a recording of yourself reading to it and submit the audio, I'm open to that. Just as long as the recording's good, the quality of the mic is good, and the topic is on topic. And yeah, that's about it. Subscribe. Oh, and just at the very end, a donation. So I guess we'll deal with that. Something that has always fascinated me is that everything that evolves requires rules that don't evolve. You have an elephant all the way down. Does anyone have any brilliant insights on that before we leave?
Who gave birth to the elephant? That's. I'm so sorry. I thought that was funny.
Brilliance.
That sounded in my head a lot funnier than it actually was.
Well, did you have something to say, John Fisher?
Oh, just my drum roll, but
okay. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Goodbye.